Hello and welcome. I would like to welcome you to the second part of our conference on the way to a new constitution in the Mediterranean and North African countries. And we shall be examining one of this process at hand of different countries. At the end of 2010, this started in Tunisia and then and spread to other countries. And all these uprising people, they had one shout, namely, the people would like to overthrow the order. That was a radical slogan. And it was a slogan that contained universal demands like freedom, dignity, social justice, bread, and employment. And this universal dimension of these demands were not any different than they were in similar movements in the United States and in the Western European countries at their time. So this was an uprising, and in none of these countries the struggle is over yet. Okay, did the order change? To what extent was the demand realized? Who and which forces are trying to prevent this from happening? What is the progress of these uprising people right now? We have guests from Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and Turkey. We decided to start with Algeria because after Ben Ali left, we were expecting something more to occur. Immediately after the movement started, the Algerian president, who was in power and was conducting an extraordinary rule for 20 years, started to make certain proposals. Omar Benderra was living in Paris. He's from the International Committee of Solidarity with the Algerian Free Trade Union. So he will do the first speech.
Thank you for the organizers to give us the opportunity to present the situation of countries. The question is frequently asked since the beginning of what the media calls the Arab Spring. Why this movement seemed to bypass Algeria? All the conditions are present for a mass expression of popular discontent. All indicators from Algeria converge towards a deep and continuous degradation of the social situation, soaring unemployment, and the increasing economic distress of much of the population. Socioeconomic conditions of large number of Algerians are even more unacceptable now that Algeria has enjoyed several years of booming oil prices after the near collapse of the 80s and the 90s. An impressive financial opulence evidenced by record levels of foreign exchange reserves, close to $200 billion. In a climate of corruption and racketeering, the strategy implemented by the government since the early 2000s, essentially government spending to promote growth in non-hydrocarbon sectors, are proved completely ineffective. Real growth between 2% and 3.5% per year between 2006 and 2010 is well below the minimum required to develop a productive economy and reduce unemployment. Astronomical cost overruns on gigantic but unfinished projects and the steady growth of imports, including food, evidence of failed economic policy that is dangerously crippling public accounts. Imbalances due by such massive yet unproductive expenditures are unsustainable. Thus, the government's radical illegitimacy is compounded by its inability to execute a development program despite the colossal financial resources expended. Faced with complete mismanagement and stratospheric corruption, the government was forced to substantially reduce its $150 billion program for the period 2009-2013. In a country where virtually no public service is working properly, Algerians are unemployed, poorly housed, poorly cared for, and live with no hope of rapid improvement in their conditions. The economic and social statistics are notoriously unreliable. The official unemployment figures, which miraculously declined from 29% in 2000 to 15.3% in 2005 and to 10.2% in late 2009, complacently relayed by the World Bank, would be mildly amusing if they did not mask a brutal reality. Despite this statistical black hole, experts estimate that the level of extreme poverty is high. Over 15% of the population, which is around 32 million people, 15% of the population lives on less than $2 a day, and income disparities are very large. Whole categories of people are simply abandoned, and the plight of cancer patients unable to find drugs for their treatment is emblematic of the criminal capture of large parts of the healthcare system. Despite colossal financial resources, the educational system from primary school to university is devastated. Algeria is ranked 104th on 182 countries in the Human Development Index of the UN, a reflection of the poor governance. In fact, people are left to the negligence of a government far removed from people's concern and whose principal characteristics are its capacity to harm its citizens and its corruption. Not only is the business climate suffocating, in the words of the World Bank, but there is an atmosphere of constant tension fueled by living conditions which are too often humiliating. The absence of the state encourages widespread outbreaks of violence and social ills. Outside the protected areas inhabited by the privileged, the ubiquitous police fail to prevent widespread insecurity and proliferation, widespread banditry. Faced with this situation, the only recourse available to le pouvoir, as we name the power in Algeria, to try to stem the discontent is to distribute periodically in a regal and erratic fashion part of the economic rent to those who reclaim it most loudly. The ruling bureaucracy, a military financial comprador bourgeoisie, formed around the heads of military intelligence, is based on two instruments: police surveillance and corruption. The security apparatus forms the invisible backbone of the system, which, ignoring completely the law, empties institutions of any substance and very considerably weakens the state. Police supervision is carried out using a very tight territorial security net and police control of all institutions and organizations, whether administrative, media, economic, cultural, religious, whether or not they are nominally part of civil society. The institutional Algeria is a Potemkin village. The reality of the dictatorship hides behind the legal facade. The real power is outside the institutions. J'ai pas fini. Sorry. The very tight police surveillance is accompanied by a strategy of fragmentation of social struggles and anesthesia by corruption. A rentier economy based on exploitation of fossil resources can indeed award grants and stipends to its clients and minimally respond to social demands by increasing the salaries in the public sector and distributing credit to unemployed youth, officially for business creation or to youth employment, but which are primarily used for the purchase of cars and other consumer goods. The orientation of a part of the rent to clients and dangerous social categories allows the creation of wealth and level of conspicuous consumption unrelated to economic activity. But it cannot calm massive expectation of the populace. The despair of Algeria results in the phenomenon of illegal immigration, we call it haraga, and the multiplication of localized riots has become a daily eruption of spontaneous popular anger, but which is without leadership or political structures. The period of the 1990 civil war, which caused 200,000 deaths, according to the official figures, nearly 20,000 disappeared, and forced displacement of hundreds of thousands of people, allowed the regime to break all representative political structures. The military junta that decided to stop the electoral process in January 1992 naturally carries the primary responsibility of a terrible bloodbath and a succession of unheard atrocities. But some Islamist leaders certainly share the guilt in having advocated armored struggle against the coup leaders and their allies. The dirty war and the climate of terror that was created allowed the dismantling of the public sector and the application of a structural adjustment program in 1994 under the aegis of the IMF, which resulted in the orientation of the economy. The anti-subversive war and the procession of emergency laws that have accompanied it mainly allowed the lockdown of the political process and the creation of a trompe-l'œil, a fake political scene under police supervision. This shadow play between an opposition constituted of cartoon characters, as Egyptians said, and the party of government has no links with political realities and is simply a screen for the interest groups that effectively run the country. The war against terror, with its legal provisions and administration, was a way to silence any critical expression, to block any form of peaceful organization of society, and to prohibit the right of demonstration and assembly. The lifting of the state of emergency in February 2011. This state of emergency was introduced in February 1992, is a purely formal concession following the Arab revolts and did not alter the repressive management in place since the coup of January 1992. The new laws on information and on association confirm the restriction on freedom of expression and repress more than in the past the freedom of association. Parties and associations outside the control of military intelligence before the coup of January 1992 were brought under control and their leadership co-opted. With the exception of the Socialist Forces Front, chaired by Hussein Hmed, the political parties that are most frequently cited by a compliant press are mere extensions of the system, including those calling for a boycott of the near legislative elections. Organization of so-called civil society, with the notable exception of some autonomous unions and some human rights NGOs, the Algerian Association for Human Rights and SOS Missing, are empty shells used to maintain the illusion to the outside world that there is a real political space in Algeria. Algerians, not fooled in the least by the manipulation of the system, are in their vast majority oblivious to the official propaganda and have no confidence whatsoever in either the actors or institution of the political system. Saturated by violence, Algerian society is truly anomic. It is in this extremely fragile internal situation that the regime now faces changes in its immediate geostrategic environment. Social movements that have swept the Tunisian regime presented of a model of enlightened authoritarian rule and the fall of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt have been perceived as a direct threat by the senior deciders of Algeria. But what has obviously baffled and stunned the generals in the intelligence service is the Western intervention in Libya. The new imperialist order gives the flavor of the days to the gunboat policy, while at the same time realigning its relation with the conservative and obscurantist wing of political Islam, the Islamic Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, under the Saudi-Qatari umbrella, is no longer demonized by the West, who now see them as effective partners in the preservation of its interests in the Arab Muslim world. Faced with the disastrous failure of Republican dictatorships, the old colonialism, draping themselves in new clothes of the right to protect, can present itself as the liberated of the Arab people. The NATO intervention in Libya and games of influence around the Syrian crisis, the updating of relation with Islam under Wahhabi influence in Tunisia and Egypt, are all indicators for concern for le pouvoir, for the system. Although it always given all the guarantees the West requested, the Algerian regime is aware that the full support enjoyed so far from France and the United States could be jeopardized if the strategic calculation of these powers were to change. The Syrian situation, a broader regime par excellence, shows that one can be courted one day and shunned the next. Long-standing alliances, including with a client regime that is cut off from its people, can be rapidly altered due to the extent of the fractures in the geostrategic region. The hypothesis, still distant, is nevertheless reinforced by the disintegration of the Malian government and the proclamation of independence of the Azawad by the Tuareg rebellion in March 2012. The evolution of the Sahelian crisis weakens the position of Algiers, charged mezzo voce by many quasi-official observers to play an assertive, if ambiguous, role in the Sahel. The abduction of hostages in the Sahara by terrorist organizations known to be manipulated by the Algerian secret police are all elements that fuel the suspicions about the real intentions of Algeria's rulers vis-à-vis a very complex problem in the Sahel. In this vast hinterland, transnational criminal organizations involved in drug trafficking and smuggling operate alongside jihadists of all stripes and widely infiltrated by various secret services, regional and Western, and normal banditry on a background of abject poverty and marginalization of the Tuareg population. Their region, immense and very difficult to control, however, is coveted for its still untapped mineral and hydrocarbon potential. The creation of the Military Command for Africa, AFRICOM, in 2006, in the wake of the US Pan-Sahel Initiative, PSI, launched in 2004, is a clear indicator of the interest of the United States in a region where the France-Afrique, the network linking France to Africa, the France-Afrique networks, with their economic interests, determine the direction of very vulnerable post-colonial states. The crisis in Mali, more than the Libyan convulsions, could have a direct impact on southern Algeria, where the temptation of autonomy, still embryonic, is fueled by the frustration of local people. The frustration of Saharan population, including the condition of abandonment, is even greater than in the north of the country, is fueled by the fact that they do not benefit from the hydrocarbon resources that are extracted from the Sahara, their own region. The structural instability of Algeria, the country's inept governance and excessive corruption of its leaders are the levers that Westerners, especially Americans, use to pressure the Algerian regime and bring it to modernize its management of the country. The activism of the American ambassador is a case in point, by his traveling around the country lauding the parliamentary system and calling for participation in the legislative elections. The United States adapt perfectly to the fully aligned Algerian system in spite of the nationalist rhetoric, as it lacks substance. Whether in the field of global war against terrorism or in oil, Algiers responds essentially to imperial expectations. Washington understands, however, that the collapse of the Algerian state and uncontrollable social explosion could have unpredictable regional repercussions. So there is a pressure to give some popular legitimacy to the electoral system that could have a more acceptable appearance for the West and prepares as much as possible an orderly transition, or rather a facelift, towards a system that is still more presentable and better accepted by the population. It's under the triple constraints of endemic social discontent, winds of protest from the East, and Western pressure that the regime holds parliamentary elections. This time, it assures it will be free of the usual fraud. And it is quite possible that this indeed technically be the case. Politics and media are almost completely locked. Annoying personalities prohibited from speaking. Almost all of the authorized parties, primarily the Islamists, under police control. So it is no longer necessary to manipulate the poll, except to exaggerate the participation of the electorate. The main obstacle lies indeed in the very low mobilization of the citizen who know the results were always decided in advance and that the elections results are those that the regime decides. The current parliamentary representation was elected in May 2007 with less than 15% participation. The official figure was 35.17. And it is not at all sure that this rate will be exceeded during the next election scheduled for 10 May 2012. The level of turnout is the only concern of the regime. Can these elections, anyway, change the nature of the regime whose decision center is extremely concentrated and be the start of a transition to a democratic and representative system? That's the question. The answer is unequivocal. Nothing will change apart from the forms. It is very likely indeed that the so-called nationalist parties, FLN and RND, are superseded by those who claim to political Islam. The winner and loser will bot only apparatuses managed by elements selected by the political police. The Islamization of the society in its reactionary form, combining profiteering and obscurantist moralizing, does not interfere with those who hold power. This shows, once again, that the Algerian crisis cannot be summed up as an ideological confrontation between secular modernists and Islamic fanatics. Can the constitution of a democratic facade according to formal standards of the West that satisfies the United States and French sponsor of the Algerian regime be enough to prevent an explosion that all feel is inevitable? In this hypothesis, does the army, whose elite and mechanized troops are first and foremost designed to maintain domestic order, keep its cohesion under the direction of the political police who supervise it and manage its promotions? No one knows. The Algerian people will celebrate the 5th of July, the 50th anniversary of a hard-won independence. The official Algeria will commemorate in the utmost discretion this highly symbolic anniversary. It is true that the result of half of a century of almost uninterrupted dictatorship are terrible. The social and democratic republic envisioned by the revolutionaries of the 1st November of 1954 has not emerged. On the contrary, the colonial order was followed by a draconian system that was both arbitrary and sterile. The history is disturbing because it holds a very cruel mirror to those who, by diverting the Algerian revolution from its democratic course, led the country into a bloody stalemate. The divorce between the Algerian people and the system of oppression that crushes the country has long been consummated. Maintaining this direction, bearing in mind the limited Algerian resources of hydrocarbons and absolute dependence to imports, poses a serious threat to the future of the Algerian people. Algeria, exhausted by blood and violence, is a country where historic cycles are long, but the era of dictatorships inevitably draws to a close. The Algerian spring, long overdue, will eventually come. Tashikur.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Birden İngilizceye geçtim ama Türkçe devam edeyim. Birazcık karamsar.
No, that was a bit pessimistic presentation, and I hope that the Tunisian revolution is still going on. And I would like to give the floor to Choukri. He is a young academician. He has also important research projects.
Conference organizers also for my invitation to this conference. Yes, the case of Tunisia is interesting for two main reasons. And the revolution is it's an ongoing process till now. Despite Tunisia is an unknown country, and it's not so noisy. We don't people don't know a lot about this small country, which population is about 10 million, so less than the city of Istanbul. But it's also a great country because it's the country that initiated the Arab revolts and the so-called Arab Spring. And therefore, it's a subject of special attention from international community and other Arab countries and Islamic countries in particular. Secondly, and this point is related to the first, it's interesting because of the strong performativity of two revolutionary moments. That is to say that in the case of Tunisia, the uprising has a real effect on reality, and the words used during this uprising had an effect on, and a direct and profound effect on reality. I must remind that the end of the what I call in my research, because I'm carrying out fieldwork research since February, last February 2011 in Tunisia about the social movements and the revolutionary process. I must remind that the end of what I call the first revolutionary situation, which began in December 17th in Sidi Bouzid and ended on the 14th of January 2011, had the slogan which was Ben Ali lived, Ben Ali dégage in French and also in Tunisian, and ended with the flight of Ben Ali in January 14th. And the second revolutionary situation, which began after this flight, was characterized by other uprisings and other demonstrations that demand the fall of the regime and the government, the state party, the former state party to release, and also a constituent assembly. And the end of this situation in the end of February 2011 ended with the decision of the second provisional government composed of former ministers of the old regime, decision to hold elections for a constituent assembly scheduled during the summer of 2011. However, this performativity and the election of a constituent assembly last October have not removed nor weakened nor social movements nor the old regime as well. On the contrary, social movements continue for over a year to be the daily lot in various fields and all over the country. In recent weeks, we see that the radicality of their mode of action and their claims and grievances, the people want to work, justice for the wounded and the injured of the revolution, has thwarted the work of the government led by Hmed Ijbeli, which is the Prime Minister of Tunisia from Nahda party, the Islamist party, who won the elections in the 23 of October 2011. The government's reaction was not long in coming. The demonstrations in April the 7th in Tunis to demand jobs for unemployed graduates, and those, especially those of April 9th, to celebrate the Day of Martyrs, were harshly repressed, which has generated their condemnation by many political and human rights organizations. Therefore, one of the most important aspects of the Tunisian revolution is the dialectic between social demands, social grievances, and political demands. Revolutions are not only political, they are also, and perhaps above all, social, and this is the case of Tunisia. They are social and political, and it's a constant dialectic since December the 17th, 2010, if we take this date as the start of the first revolutionary situation in Tunisia, when Mohamed Bouazizi has self-immolated in front of the wilaya of Sidi Bouzid. I think one can read the history of Tunisia from December the 17th as the succession of 4 revolutionary situations. The first, I reminded, it began on the 17th of December and finished on the 14th of January 2011 with the flight of Ben Ali and the article 56 of the Constitution, when the Prime Minister took over as the President of the Republic, temporarily prevented. And the second revolutionary situation began on the 14th of January and ended on the 27th of February, when the provisional government, composed of former ministers of the old regimes, resignate after a big mobilization and protest in the place of the government of El Kasbah in Tunis, and led to another provisional government of Beji Qaid al-Sibsi, which is a former minister of Habib Bourguiba. He's about 84, and the claims for a constituent assembly led to this, to the realization of this claim by a high authority. The third revolutionary situation, which began in the 27th of February and ended on 23rd of October, was characterized by the fix of the electoral process, the creation of a high authority for independent elections, the political campaign, an electoral campaign, and ended with the election for the Constituent Assembly. And the fourth revolutionary situation, since the 23rd of October till now, is characterized by the composition of this Constituent Assembly, the election of the President of the Assembly, of the government, and of the Republic, and an appointment, the appointment of a new government on the 23rd of December. And this situation is not quite, because we still witness a lot of multi-sector mobilization and different conflicts between Ennahda and the trade union, for example, or Ennahda and the opposition, the so-called democratic opposition, and also Salafist events. So I will develop three main ideas in my intervention now. First, I will analyze the choice of the Constituent Assembly as a non-uncertain process. After that, I will see analyze the dialectic between political demands and social demands, and I will end with an analysis of the confrontation between the Islamists and modernists opposition. So we must first emphasize that the process that led Tunisia to the adoption of the solution of the Constituent Assembly is not a dynamic that emerged only among jurists, lawyers, or politicians. This solution was the issue and the outcome of a violent struggle between different political groups involved within the revolution process. Indeed, the option of the Constituent Assembly was one of the strongest political demands of the movement called the Kasbah, that began in the end of January 2011 and ended in the end of February. And this movement began of the inner regions of Tunisia, primarily Sidi Bouzid and Kasserine, after the first one held in late January that ended with its repression by the police. Activists were protesting essentially against the presence of former ministers, as I said, of Ben Ali in the interim government of Mohamed Ghannouchi, which is not Rashid Ghannouchi, okay, Ben Ali's prime minister since 1999. And thereby against the permanency of the institution of the old regime. So the most known slogan was "Sha'b yurid isqat al-nizam." People want the removal of the regime of the order of the system. They staged a sit-in extended on Government Square at the Kasbah during 2 weeks, and political parties such as Ennahda and the Union Trade UGTT has directly or indirectly participated to the movement. Its outcome was very uncertain. The occupation of the place was violently repressed by security forces as the Hajj rally, about 100,000 persons, held on February the 25th, whose main slogan was "The people want a constituent assembly." The event ended in confusion, clashed with police and blood, and the consequence of this extended sit-in was twofold. First, the resignation of Mohamed Ghannouchi's government and the nomination of Beji Qaid Essebsi, as I said, the former minister of Habib Bourguiba, a historical leader of the Constitutional Democratic Rally, which was the state party in Tunisia for last 50 years. Second, the political class, aided by cross-cutting mobilizations such as lawyers, trade unionists, party activists, young unemployed graduates, has largely succeeded in imposing the credo that the best way to continue the revolution by other means was the elections for the Constituent Assembly. There was an overall consensus on this point between the left and the progressive forces, also among the Arab nationalists, the old elites of the Constitutional Democratic Rally, the Islamists of Ennahda, but not the Salafi Al-Tahrir party, which is banned in Tunisia till now. But above all, the main actor was the UGTT. So there is a gap that is noteworthy in the case of Tunisia, although it's hard to put a break with the past into action, as seen for the reform of the judicial or security apparatus or the media. The political revolution has been successful in many ways. The most radical rupture was the holding of these free, democratic, and transparent elections on October via the creation of the High Independent Authority for the Elections designated in the end of May 2011. But also the formation of the Constituent National Assembly and that of the government 2 months after the election, and also the election of the President of the Republic. So not only the temporary authorities, but also political actors and most of the militant and activist and political organizations, trade union, has converted to the idea of the Constituent Assembly, despite the differences over the nature of the regime, parliamentary, presidential, etc., and on the election date. Let us analyze now the relationship or the dialectic between political demands and social demands. It's my second point. The choice of the Constituent Assembly had two contradictory effects. On one hand, it has accelerated the process of institutional reform, not revolution, reform, and electoral competition between old and new politicians. On the other hand, it emphasized the urgency of social transformation and the impatience of the most disadvantaged groups, such as unemployed, excluded, and precarious. The main advances and achievements took place within the institutional field and specifically within political institutions. Thus, from the announcement of elections for the Constituent Assembly, Tunisians have witnessed from early March and during 3 months the creation of new political institutions and the deleting of old ones that somehow have fallen into disuse or became illegitimate. The characteristic of the new institutions is that they evolve between legality and legitimacy. They are not resulting from elections, but their creation is often the result of executive orders issued by the President of the Republic, the Provisional President of the Republic, Fouad Mbaza, who is also an old classic of the Democratic Rally. Okay, 7 minutes. 7 minutes, so 7 minutes. Perhaps I developed the third point about the confrontation between Islamists and modernist opposition. The results of the elections for the Constituent Assembly revealed 3 surprises. It was expected that the Islamist party, Nahda, would win, even if this victory is relative. They did not get, on the evening of October the 23rd, an absolute majority in the assembly. Thus, so-called Troika was formed in the weeks that followed the elections. It took the form of an alliance between 3 major parties, Nahda, led by Rashid Ghannouchi, and 2 parties that can be classified on the center-left, the Congress for the Republic, led by Monsef Marzouki, the current President of the Republic, and the Democratic Front for Labor and Liberties, headed by Mustafa Ben Jafar, the current President of the National Assembly. So taken together, these parties won nearly 64% of the Assembly seats, and the first surprise was that the main losers were the self-nominated secularists or Democrats parties, composed of the extreme left, the Tunisian Workers' Communist Party, won only 3 seats, although he was a very important organization, an activist organization who played a real and central role in the revolution. But especially the modernist democratic pole made for much of the renovated Communist Party, and the Democratic Progressive Party did not exceed 10% of the seats. The second surprise is the collapse of parties from the former state party of the old regime, which leveled off at less than 2.5%. And finally, the third surprise was the list of the popular petition for justice, freedom, and development, which is a demagogic and populist party, especially in disadvantaged internal regions. And they won 29 seats, making it the second political force of the country. These results were interpreted in Tunisia and in Europe as the victory of the Islamic winter, succeeding to the democratic spring. Both journalists and experts have tried to show that the democratic aspirations of the Tunisian men and women would be thwarted by the power of the Islamic Party, described as non-democratic or authoritarian. It is worth noting that since the electoral campaign, the party leaders who have lost the elections, especially those who claim to modernity, the defense of individual liberties, even the legacy of Habib Bourguiba, are likely to show that the intentions of the largest party in power is the Islamization of Tunisian society and the preparation of a theocracy. Actually, the discussions and the political debates that occupy the public space before, during, and after the campaign focused on the identity of a Tunisian state and a society. A series of dramatic events popularized by the media came regularly to remind Tunisians that the key issue that needed to be discussed was the place of Islam within society, politics, and the constitution. But contrary to popular belief, the attention paid to these debates is not new. It developed under the regime of Bourguiba and Ben Ali, whereas this matrix has mainly organized the opposition to the dictatorship. It is therefore not surprising that it continues to structure the political opposition after the flight of the dictator. But the focus on identity issues that are since then the major issues of political and electoral struggle led to overshadow other central claims and grievances of the revolution. The first one is the remediation of justice, establishing the facts related to repression during the first revolutionary situation and the judgment of officials. And the second one is the employment and labor, since almost 800,000 individuals are officially unemployed in 2011, representing 21% of the workforce. It's chiefly for this reason that the process of constitutional change, which should be completed in 2013, if we are to believe the recent statements by the head of government, is problematic. On one side, many opposition parties are contesting the Troika electoral legitimacy, arguing that the high abstention rate at the elections for the Constituent Assembly, around 45% of likely voters and registered, tarnishes the representativeness of the 3 ruling parties. This denunciation is politically dangerous because it led to the removal of the strength of the electoral process, and it may be understood paradoxically as a call to return to the authoritarian rule. On the other hand, the focus on issues of identity and the place of Islam in society leads to stigmatize Islamists as non-democrats and ultimately to bring up the former party state whose members have recently coalesced. This former political elite might be tempted to guarantee a return to order, arguing both their historical legitimacy and their state skills. I conclude in 1 minute? Okay. Thus, we have seen that the way to a new constitution in Tunisia was both a widely popular claim and a way for the former political and economical elite to reposition themselves, even passing the revolutionary demands and grievances in the background. The polarized positions seen in recent months shows how the process is not completed. The revolution is an ongoing process, and that contrary to common opinion, it is less on the side of the Islamists that we should fear a counter-revolution, that on the side of the former executives of the Constitutional Democratic Rally, associated or supported by a democratic opposition whose links with the base remain weak, and whose social and economic agenda and program remain largely indigent and unable to meet the expectations of the people. Thank you.
Choukri, thank you so much. Ben de belki son bölümdü ama gene de altını çizmek isterim çünkü
I just want to underline that there are some parallelisms between the two cases, as you, I'm sure, also see. When we talk about a social, a popular claim, demand for the making of a new constitution, and how this could also be shaped by political and economic elites in a way so as to create some privileges for themselves. I think that was an important point. And we have some similar discussions in our country too. For example, we have discussions about whether or not Sharia will prevail, and we sometimes reduce the discussion only to that point or some similar points, whereas we have to look at the real demands, claims that lie behind claims by the people, and sometimes the media doesn't portray everything in that detail. Now I turn to Egypt. Ramy Mohsen is a lawyer, jurist, who has been involved with a number of politicians, and because he served as consultant to a number of them, and he is also trying to create some legal awareness, and that's why he's established an NGO called Develop Together. You have the floor.
In the beginning, I am very pleased and honored to be among you today to contribute in the proceedings of the conference in your beautiful country, Turkey, but I prefer that I can speak in Arabic. كنت أفضل أن أنا أتكلم باللغة العربية، دي لغة بلدي، وأجد ترجمة Arabic translate، لكن للأسف لا، خاصة إن معانا الجزائر وتونس وفي حد من السودان وفي كذا، لكن ما لقيتش ترجمة بالعربي، فأوكي I will speak in Arabic and I will talk till you آسف in English and I will talk till you say stop, we are pouring and you are pouring. So my speech will address the recent political change in Egypt that have happened since the toppling of the old regime in 11 February 2012. I will also shed the light on the main causes and ramifications of our Egyptian revolution. Our Egyptian revolution يسقط حسني مبارك، يسقط حكم العسكر، يسقط كل من آذى شهيد، نعم للحرية والعدالة الديمقراطية. These slogans, the revolution's main demanded changed over and over in every protest. Freedom, social justice, human dignity, none of this mean demanded has been met. Egypt has been a republic since 18th June 1953, since the declaration of the Republic. In early 2011, following the Tunisian revolution, there was a revolution in Egypt. Mass protests completed Mubarak, the leader of the National Democratic Party, to resign on 11 February 2011, ending his fifth term in office. The outsiting of Mubarak was followed by a series of arrests or imposed travel bans on high-profile figures on charges of causing the death of 500 demonstrators and the injury of more than 5,000, as well as charges of embezzlement, profiting, money laundering, and abuse of human rights. Mubarak was replaced by the Supreme Council of the Armed Force, which dissolved the Parliament of Egypt, suspended the Constitution of Egypt, and promised free, open presidential and parliamentary elections before the year's end and within 6 months. On 20 March, a constitutional referendum was voted on and based the provisional constitution of the Arab Republic of Egypt, or Constitutional Declaration of 2011, in the new provisional fundamental law of Egypt. Fundamental law of Egypt. It was deposited on March 13, 2011 by the Egyptian Supreme Council of the Armed Force. No revolution. Who have been in power since the former President Hosni Mubarak is powerful to the Supreme Council of the Armed Force on February 2011. The article provisional constitution was proclaimed to obtain or as a working constitution in the current political translation period following the revolution until a new one is drafted and approved. The new provisional constitution have included the most recent amendments publicly approved in a referendum, provisional articles defending the powers of the executive and judicial branches, as well as institutional law to govern the presidential, limiting the presidency to 2 4-year terms, providing judicial supervision of elections, requiring the president to appoint a duty, calling for a commission to draft a new constitution following the parliamentary elections, and either access to professional presidential elections by candidates. 3,000 signatures for at least 15 provides 13 members of a chamber of the legislative or nomination by a party holding at last one. Sit in the legislatures, where are parliamentarians' election process. It has paved the way for parliamentary elections in late 2011 and presidential elections in 2012. Directly established that the newly elected parliament for a new constitutional drafting committee, the Constitution Assembly of Egypt, to write a new constitution. Freedom was given to establish political parties only by notifying concerned authorities, resulting in establishing several political parties named after or in relation to the 25 January Revolution. Therefore, since the revolution, Islamist parties such as the Muslim Brotherhood have shown unprecedented strength in the new, more democratic landscape, taking leading roles in constitutional changes, voter mobilization, and protests. This was a noted concern among the secular and youth movements, who wants any elections to be held later rather than sooner, so that they might catch up with the already well-organized groups. Elections were held in September 2011 with the Party of Liberty and Justice, the newborn party of the Muslims Brotherhood, gaining 48 from court vote in the elections, although many claim that this victory for the Brotherhood means the control of region's party over Egypt. Yet the youth movements and liberal parties bet on people's constitutions and the normal tolerant people of Egypt wouldn't allow another Iran in Egypt. The processed draft law for the electoral system to be used was revealed on 13 May 2011. Constitutions it returned first past the post voting for 2/3 of the seats, with only 1/3 of the seats elected by proportional representations. However, later it was changed as to 2/3, 332 of MPs to be elected proportionally from lists. On 7 July 2011, the Characterial Governmental approved the new electoral law. It outlined a new 50-50 division between proportional seats and FPTP seats. The minimum age limited for the candidates is also to be reduced from 13 to 25. On 21 July 2011, the SCAF announced that the election for both the People's Assembly and the Shura Council would be held in 3 rounds in October, with 15 days intervals in between. That half the seat will be reserved for laborers and farmers. That the women's quota introduced under Mubarak would be abolished. In late September 2011, again, a new vision was announced in which only 1/3 of the seats would be elected by an FPTP vote. However, this directly elected MPs could only be independents and not members of political parties. This restriction led to threat or the elections by a wide swath of the political parties which intended to consent to the election. The parties states that their demands for change in the electoral law would have to be met by 2 October, else they would be boycott the election. After a meeting with political party leaders on 1 October 2011, the SCAF agreed to allow party members to run for the directly elected states, set a clearer timetable for the translation of civilization rule and possibility approach multiple trails for civilizations. About 15 million people were eligible to vote out of the population in excess of 85 million, with candidates from 50 registered political parties. The overall vote turnout is 54. Freedom and Justice Party with 47% of lower house parliamentary seats, followed by El Noor Party winning. El Noor Party winning 24 0.7 of seats. A total of 15 political parties are represented in this parliamentary of 498 elected seats, will 21 parties were limited for party listed seats because they did not attend the 0.5 percentage votes on the national level. 10 members of parliament were directly appointed by head of SCAF. On the other hand, out of total 217 seats in the upper house, 180 seats are up for grabs, and the also seats shall be appointed after the present election. The president-elect originally the election was planned to be held in 3 stages, with the third stage taking place on 4 or 5 March and run-offs on 11/12 March. But in early January 2012, the election process was sped up to shorten the transitions period. On January 24th, Mushir Tantawi announced that he would be lifting the state of emergency just 1 day before the first anniversary of the start of the revolution. On January 25th, the Egyptian people made the 1st anniversary of the beginning of the Egyptian revolution, February. On February, the 1st February 2012, more than 70 people were killed at a football game in a Port-Said, state of Port-Said. Members? No, yes, it's the same message. Okay, I will go through, but I'm trying to go through. Yeah. But I will put this paper. Okay. Okay. The presidential election will be held in Egypt on 23 and 24 May. 24 and 23 and 24 May, with a run of 16 and 17 June 2012, and if necessary. It will be the second presidential election in Egypt's history with more than one candidate, following the 2005 election, and the first presidential election after the 2011 Egyptian revolution during the Arab Spring. Rules. The rules for the election were released on 13 January 2012. Candidates have to be born in Egypt to Egyptian parents may not hold dual nationality and may not be married to a foreigner to be nominated. They require the support of 13 MPs or 3,000 voters according to electoral committee. The formal registration process for candidates started on 10 March and ended on 8 April 2011. This is on April 26, SCAF announced its final list of 13 candidates, and now with the transitions period now stretched out to nearly 18 months. Some are fearful of last minute by which the military may decided not to hand over power at all. We'll see if Egypt might witness another revolution. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel a little bit responsible because I just, cracked this, structure of the dissertation. Maybe, could I stress that 2 points that I suppose that you wanted to mention? Yeah. One is the presidential elections are very important because it's a presidential system which we have in Egypt. And the second, I suppose, the Constitutional Assembly is also another step if we will see a real second revolution or not. Is it so? Just, do you mind?
Okay, I think.
Just briefly putting it.
Okay. I think, in my opinion, in Egypt will be there about 2 or 3 months. Will be there second revolution because number one, the parliament didn't make a good life, didn't make a good political life, didn't change the Egyptian life. Number two, till now, the millions in Tahrir Square still. Till this moment in Egypt, there are 2 or 3 millions in Tahrir and in Scav and in other ways on Egypt. So we think, I am and most of Egyptians think there will be another revolution after 2 or 3 months. I think that. Number two, election system, or election president system. I think till now, the committee who make the elections in Egypt, I think it's do it very bad for all Egyptians, do it very bad for all candidates, and I think we will need a good law in which make all of Egyptians can voting in the Egypt and the other in the world. Number two, I think this committee will be make the elections not good on the Egyptian side or on the other of countries. So I think that this system is very bad and didn't make any change, didn't make any powerful, didn't make any good life in Egypt. So that I think most of Egyptian thinks that there are another revolution since 2 or 3 months ago.
Ramy, thank you very much. Demek ki bir devrim daha geliyor.
Okay, another revolution is coming. I would like to give the floor to Ayhan Bilgen. Ayhan Bilgen is a journalist and a writer, and since 2009, he is one of the founders of the Democratic Constitutional Movement. Well, if microphone does not come to us, we have to approach the microphone closer. This is what the struggle for democracy entails. Well, in meetings like this, there is a particular difficulty to be a speaker, because some of the participants and listeners, either they live with you in the same country and follow the developments very closely in that country. So you either try to address them, and in that case you enter into a very detailed discussion, which makes it impossible for the foreign participants to fully understand this detailed discussion. If you do the reverse, then maybe the foreign participants will understand you better, but your speech will be very superficial for those who know the state of affairs in Turkey much better. Well, maybe I should say a few words about the Arab Spring. This will be a torture for the for the interpreters. We say that if a dramatic situation does not directly influence us, then we can be satisfied. So if the snake doesn't come and bite you, then I don't have anything against the snake. This is the translation of the proverb. So if you listen to the Turks, it seems as if we were the only driving forces behind the change in the Middle East, as if we are the leader and the manager of all these changes. If one would ask how many of your diplomats know Arabic and how many people in the Turkish intelligence services knows Arabic, these figures will show the clarity of the situation. Unfortunately, this is also in connection with the role that Turkey has assumed in recent years, and also the language it uses. Obviously, every country would like to be a strong leader in its and an influential leader in its region. However, in order to be able to do that, you have to be aware of your own realities. If you are not aware of your own realities in your country, then it won't be possible for implementing an efficient foreign policy. Obviously, there are other parameters to do that, but the most issue that one should discuss here in this connection is the domestic politics in Turkey. If you make a formal comparison, obviously, Turkey's regime is quite democratic. We are a democratic country formally since 1946. There is a multi-party constitutional system. Since 1946, we hold free and independent elections. There is a free media. There is a free and liberal private sector. So there are many formal appearances to say that, but are these factors the real measures for the existence of a real democracy? If you compare this regime to dictatorships, to kingdoms, and so forth, yes, relatively we might be stronger. But where is the limit to media independence and freedom? What is the criteria to measure and to answer the question whether there is media freedom or under which conditions the media freedom is in danger? If you know that more than 100 journalists are in jail today, is a sufficient criteria. Because this is known by the Prime Minister, the President, and many ministers representing Turkey abroad claim that these persons are not in jail because they are journalists and they practice the profession of journalism. Because of other things they are in jail, they say. But what is the criteria to judge this? Some of them are accused of theft, terrorist activities, embezzlement, and corruption, and so on. So then you start calculating 5 or 15, 20 of them are embezzlers, 20, 25 have been committing fraud, and the rest. However, when you look at the indictments prepared against these journalists, because that should be the basic document here, these indictments contain neither of the sort. Even if you read these indictments only superficially, then you get a different picture of Turkey. But if you enter into the details, you are faced with another reality. The fact that we are holding free elections, is that a good indicator? I will mention two things, and I would like to give you examples from practical life. For instance, the 10% hurdle, election hurdle. 2 elections before, Turkey witnessed an election where almost half of the votes cast was not represented in the parliament, and since then the parliament, that was the elections of 2002. There, 40 to 50% of the votes remained outside of the parliament because of the 10% hurdle, but that 10%. Had it been lowered, then maybe this parliamentary arithmetic will not come into being, and maybe we would be governed by coalitions right now. Another important issue is the inter-party democracy. You may become a candidate from a party and you may stand for election, but if your inter-party democracy is almost zero, and if everything is determined by the party leader, then it is impossible, and it won't mean much that the elections are under the protection of the constitution and the law. Yes, that was a picture of the Turkish democracy, just to show you why Turkey needs a new constitution and what kind of a process is it implementing right now. We have to put all this onto a pillar in order to understand it very well, because Turkey, in the first place, has a very serious Kurdish problem. In the last 30 years, we had an environment of armed confrontation where 10,000s of people lost their lives. According to the official figures pronounced by the government, is that there was a spending of $500 million. That was the economic cost of this war. Forget the internally displaced people, forget the damages done to human lives, and so on and so forth. In Turkey, Turkey has come to the position that it can no longer govern this situation. This is why Turkey is in need of a new constitution. Everybody who has a clear conscience makes that statement. Not only social democrats, but also conservative people, be it in the civilian organization or in the media. Everybody agrees that the most urgent reason for having a new constitution is the Kurdish problem. How does one wish the Kurdish problem to be resolved so that this can be realized in a peaceful environment after the new constitution is adopted? I think this is the question to which we have to look for an answer. We have to make a discussion about the rights of the Kurds, and this session will not be sufficient for that. And secondly, we have to discuss how actively the Kurds will take part in this constitutional process, because there are two definitions for the preparation of the constitution. First of all, it's in content, and the second one, it's the way it is prepared. For the second issue, I would like to give you an example. How long can the writing of a new constitution take? This duty has been assumed by the parliament. In the parliament, there are 4 political parties represented. There is a committee that is governing the preparation and the writing of the text of the new constitution in the Turkish parliament, including also a Kurdish party. The NGOs, constitutional platforms, many other institutions presented their views to that effect. And now they will start to write the text. During that process, we don't know how much the submitted proposals will be taken into consideration. There is no statement to the public opinion to that effect. Imagine you are calling out to the civil society, to the universities, claiming that the civilian society does not participate in this process sufficiently. They don't make their views heard. But on the other hand, you do not make any explanations at all about how these proposals will be taken into consideration. The second issue is with regard to the methodology. There is the Democratic Society Congress, which is the platform for the Kurdish groups. They would like to establish a stand, and they would like to get some signatures regarding their 4 requirements, like the autonomy, definition of the citizenship, the mother tongue, and so on. And however, they are not allowed to establish a stand which is open to public so that the public can come and vote there. None of the governors allow this. Ahmet Türk and his colleagues would like to come to the parliament to explain their party's view on the constitutional preparation. However, some of the committee members tell them that we do not consider you as our legitimate counterparts and as the representatives. Therefore, we won't allow you to come to the parliament, and we won't listen to you. The dimension with regard to the youth, to the women, to the Alewites, or the conscientious objectors, trade unions, I leave everything aside, although they are of utmost importance. But if you make a constitution for the solution of the Kurdish problem, this is the state of participation of the Kurdish people to this process. Maybe I'm drawing a very pessimistic picture, but I still believe that in this year, Turkey will continue its political life with a new constitution. And I'm thinking of what type of a constitution will be written, how democratic will it be, to which extent will it be capable of solving the Kurdish problem. And in that respect, I have very serious concerns. Well, tell me when I go into time difficulties so that I can wrap up. And I apologize again to the interpreters, because I will tell you an anecdote, because it is very difficult to make a proper analysis of certain situations. Most of the countries here are coming from the Middle Eastern countries, and they are Islamic countries, so they know the procedures of how to practice the namaz. Namaz is something that you have to perform in the Islamic religion, is the Muslim religion. There is an anecdote from the Bektashi sect. A senior person was asked, can you take the namaz before having washed yourself properly according to the abdest? And the Bektashi answered, yes, we did it, and it went okay. So in an environment where so many people, so many media people, so many academicians, so many Kurdish people, so many politicians are jailed because of membership to an organization, while so many people are still detained, I don't know whether a democratic constitution will be prepared. The answer would be, yes, we did it, and it went okay. You may claim that, but to which extent this is a democratic constitution and to what extent this will democratize Turkey will still be a big question mark. So I would like to dwell on the participative mechanisms, therefore. Participation does not only mean expressing your view like the Helsinki Citizens Assembly. we have activists who know the Caucasus very well. I know that you are very knowledgeable people, and in front of you, I can't say that participation only means stating your opinion. This would be a joke. Participation has many conditions and many forms, and in order to call a constitutional preparation process participative, there are certain sine qua non conditions. And how much of them are implemented in Turkey right now, we don't know. I don't want to give you a long list of examples, but I will suffice by mentioning only one or two in order to underline some of the actual situations. One example is the proposal of the chairmanship of human rights attached to the prime ministry. The participants or the members of this institution, in order to contribute to the preparation process of the new constitution, they prepared a list of their proposals, which included vital issues. First of all, it was one of them was that it would be highly dangerous in Turkey to increase the competences and the authority of the president. And I completely am of the same view, in favor of the same view, because Turkey is very, very rapidly heading towards a non-defined, obscured presidential system. And they just make it seem that this is not the case, so they are misleading all the people, which I don't approve at all. Secondly, recently, Turkey has been governed through, not through laws, but through governmental decrees. So the parliament is competent to promulgate laws. However, that role has been taken over by the government. And the reasoning was in order to protect of those who make those proposals, and that nobody who make the proposals should be punished later on. And therefore, there is an internet site of the Turkish parliament where these proposals were published, and there again these views are not being published. So we are talking about more transparency, more openness, more democracy. But at the same time, you obscure certain information not only for the civilian population but also for the public civil servants, because you underline the possibility that they might encounter certain problems if they wished to voice their views. So this shows how much trust we have in our environment right now, and how free, to what extent the discussions at this moment are free or not. So let's discuss the Kurdish problem a bit also within the context of the Middle East. The issue between Turkey and Syria has been followed with great importance and very closely by everybody who knows those relations. These relations are not only neighborly relations. Turkey has witnessed the crises or the tensions in other neighboring countries, and Turkey does not take them as seriously as in the case of Syria. For instance, in Greece, they are going through a very difficult process right now, which might lead to many important changes in future. But these issues are not on Turkey's agenda. Or in the Caucasus, there are many tensions. But why is Syria really so important for Turkey? You can have a multiple choice test out of us. Turkey is very sensitive regarding democracy and would like democracy to govern all the neighboring countries. Therefore, they want the Baas party to leave, that the majority of the population should be represented in the parliament. This is the official discourse in Turkey. This is the one alternative. The second alternative is the following. Turkey looks into the world through the Kurdish spectacles. Turkey is determining its policies, stating that everything should happen, but Kurds should not get any independence anywhere. And they are testing this. For instance, in order to change the regime in Syria, our prime minister goes and has his pictures taken with King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, as if in Saudi Arabia there is a perfect democratic regime. As if we want to give the impression that we, the two very democratic powers in the region, make the signal that to Assad that you should leave the government and leave it to the people, or we go to Qatar and have pictures taken there. Let's read this issue from the historical point of view. It has not even been a year when Gaddafi gave a human rights award to Prime Minister Erdogan. And this was very highly debated in the Turkish public opinion. Who is Gaddafi? What does the human rights award mean? How can you receive an award in that on that important subject from Gaddafi? You know who Gaddafi is. And against all these criticisms, the Prime Minister Erdogan stated that he will never return this award, and he said his reasonings also. And afterwards, after some time, certain initiatives were started against Libya. First, NATO gave her reaction, saying that what does NATO to do there? And then Turkey was used by NATO in her territory. And now Libya has finally reached a democratic regime, as far as we call it democracy. So we can say a great many things also, but in summary, what I would like to underline is the following. Also in our regional relations and in our internal transformation, we have a regime that is excessively concentrated on the Kurdish issue. Our measure are the Kurds. Even if we were discussing Sudan or something about, we should have discussed the issue of the Christians living to the south of that country. And if we were to talk about the danger of an internal war in Turkey, then we have to deal with this problem from the point of view of the Kurdish problem as well. But in an environment where you are so much indexed to the Kurdish issue, I think it is not possible to reach a full democracy. This will be highly naive and highly difficult. Well, a representative democracy crisis. So our moderator is being very, very polite. She doesn't send me any notes yet, but she looks me into the eye and I understand. So I have to wrap up. Well, I don't know whether Turkey is having the formal democratic institutions functioning, or the sociological structure of the Middle East, the sect differences, economic and social situation. The lesson I draw is the following. Yes, it is good to get rid of military regimes, from regimes like the Baas regime. The democratization isolation and the alienation of the civilian population from the military is very, very important. These are sine qua non conditions for democracy. We need the democratic regime that will protect the citizens and give them the opportunity to take part in the government. This is a qualification valid not only for this region, globally. Globally, democracy is to be interpreted in a different manner. So, in the United States, where the separation of powers is highest, they even say we are 99%. So this shows a motivation message. But they have another slogan, and I think that is more pertinent and also will shed a light on our way. If something were to change in the ballot box, then you would have been forbidden that too. Thank you very much. I think 10 minutes coffee break would be sufficient for all of us, and then